In today's video, we're going to take a look at the latest trade rumors, which we're focusing on a new article from Sportsdom Jeff Marek, where he's created his trade bait board of the top 25 players. So we're going to take a look at some of the more interesting names on this list. Plus, we also have some updates from the Board of Governor meetings in Boca Raton, Florida. And we have an update regarding the Arizona Coyotes situation where they had to pay a lot of debt or they were going to end up possibly being locked out of their arena. What was their excuse and what's happening moving forward? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at here today. So let's get started first with the situation in Arizona. Now, the Coyotes, of course, we ran into a real emerging story yesterday, which we put out a video on, and there was a great response, lots of views, so certainly appreciate everybody taking the time to listen and watch that video. Certainly a really disturbing situation where they're severely behind on a lot of payments, including state and city taxes, as well as expenses to the arena management team, as well as arena rent payments. So clearly this team had to pay a bunch of debt by December the 20th, which is what was released, or they were going to risk being locked out of their arena and they'd have no place to play. There are people who work for the organization would not be able to go to work. So this was quite a story now. Well after that video was published, into the wee hours of the night after I was long asleep for the evening because of the time difference. I believe it was around 1 or 2 in the morning here, my local time at least, when the statement was released by the Coyotes. And the statement that they put out, and I'll show you here on the screen, essentially says that they're not really sure what happened. They've launched an investigation, and the early indications make it look like there was an unfortunate human error. But payments would be made as early as today, so they can, like tomorrow, as in we're now not into tomorrow, and would rectify the situation. So that's quite the statement. Like, human error caused you to not be able to pay your bills from last season. So a lot of what was outstanding and owing that they were threatening on was last year's bills. So a lot of this was from the 2021 season. We're now in 21-22 season. So the other thing that I find very odd about this is that where the part of it, that's the taxes. So they owed, I think it was $1.3 or $4 million in city and state taxes. Now, here's the thing. I can speak from a lot of experience after working for 20 years in the finance world. I've dealt with several of my clients over the years. I mainly deal in mortgage lending, but I've had a lot of clients. Some of them are, have a lot of businesses. Some of it's more personal, a combination of both, where they've run into tax debt and tax bills that they needed to get rectified. Sometimes they had a lien on their properties, sometimes not, and all that. So I can speak from a lot of personal, professional experience here. They do not, governments, whether or not, I know I'm in Canada, so they're in the US, things I'm sure are similar, but not identical. But still, federal, provincial, state, municipal, all these governments that you can owe taxes to are going to do everything they can to track you down and make arrangements before they go putting liens on your property. So that's what was happening. They were getting a tax lien. So they don't go out to do that. So ultimately, then the reporters covering the story have also talked to the arena management contact, which is Kevin Phelps, and who he said himself as well is that the statement seemed odd because they make several attempts between phone and written letters to advise you to pay this or you're at risk. So it's not like, it shouldn't come as a shock. Anybody who gets a tax lien, it shouldn't be like, oh my God, I don't know what happened. No, you're well aware because you've been ignoring the phone of the collectors. You've been ignoring the mail and the letter saying you need to pay your tax bill, and you're just not dealing with it. Either you can't afford to pay it, you're choosing not to pay it, or whatever the reason is. So to me, it makes absolutely no sense at all that it could be some sort of human error. That's the biggest load of BS I've ever heard in my life. And it's certainly not true. But I suppose, what are they supposed to say? They're trying to save face here. But to be honest, I think they would have been better off to not even put out a statement at all, because they just make themselves look really bad, in my opinion. Now, so that's not the end of the story, though. So we got another statement today saying that the checks were dropped off and that everything was paid. That's not completely true. So we got more information tonight from more reporters, including Katie Strang of The Athletic, who's following up on this, as well as Mike Stevens, who's reached out to Kevin Phelps, the contact for the arena management company. And he says that they did drop off 2 checks, and the checks were to cover the taxes and the game day expenses, but nothing about the arena rent. So obviously they don't own Gila River Arena. That's leased through the city of Glendale. That has not been paid. So realistically here, they could still possibly be locked out, but it sounds like that they're going to be getting more communication from the city of Glendale regarding this. And I'm not sure if they're going to still try to enforce a lockout or if they're going to be a little bit more easy to work with them now that they paid all the other stuff. But it's still not, completely rectified here. And the other thing, too, that Elliotte Friedman was talking about today, because he's down in Florida at the Board of Governors meetings, and he was kind of going based on what he was hearing and saying that they could be also asked to pay a lot of their expenses for the rest of the year up front in advance, because they're going to be concerned that even though they get this paid and get it caught up, that they're going to still have to chase them again and have the same thing happen when it comes to the future payments for the rest of this season. So he believes that, based on what he understood, is they're going to be having to make payments monthly, and they're going to have to agree to this monthly in advance. So they could run into more situations if they're not able to pay. This might not be the only time that they're going to be threatened to be locked out. And how many times is the landlord going to be giving you that threat before they say, you know what, screw it, we're done, we're not chasing you anymore? That's what can happen. It's no different, like I said, from my own personal professional experience working in finance and mortgage lending all those years. Like if you get behind on your mortgage, the bank doesn't really want to take your house. That's not what they're out to do. They would, they want to avoid that if at all possible, because there's a ton of expenses with taking it over, maintaining it, trying to get it sold, all that. Like, they don't want to do that, right? So, but at some time, though, if you get behind on your payments and you're constantly running behind and they're always chasing you, eventually you're late that many times, they can just be like, you know what, we're tired of this, we're foreclosing. It's the same sort of scenario. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So this, I know a lot of people go on to say about the Tempe bid and that this is all going to work out and they've got this big elaborate plan. And like, you know what? I understand that the whole bid in Tempe is not just an arena. It's like a whole entertainment district, essentially, with all kinds of other shopping and restaurants and, other establishments in the area. Like, they want to build like a whole, community, basically, of where people can, like a destination type of thing, right? Because if you have just a big arena with nothing around it, you're going to have a hard time drawing people in. So that's obviously what they're doing. So I've heard people say, well, obviously they're going to have a lot of other millionaire and billionaire people going to partner with them, and they're going to want to invest in this because they're going to be opportunities for them to get their businesses there. I'm like, who's going to want to work with these guys, to be completely honest? Like, they've even reached out, like Katie Strang and like Mike Stevens, these guys covering it. They've even reached out to the people at the Tempe that are dealing with this bid to see, like, is this going to affect how their bid is being viewed? And they didn't really get a clear, definite answer, but it sounded like it was possible, because obviously there are going to be concerns over their cash flow and over their ability to follow through. Like, you can put everything on paper and make it look great, but if you can't follow through, it's useless. Like, I've had, like I said, again, from my own personal experience and professionally in what I do for a living outside of YouTube, somebody can come to me and be like, yeah, I want to buy this property and I've got all this money and I've got this, come up and present this great big elaborate plan that they want me to help them finance, and then they can't follow. Then I'll say, okay, it sounds good, we can get a tentative approval, but it's all conditional that you can verify this and you can verify that and you can verify this. And then they start running into difficulties because they can't back up what they told me. Happens all the time. Same sort of scenario. So, like, who's going to want to work with them based on reputation when they can't even pay their bill? So it's really a unique situation. Now, Gary Bettman didn't have much to say. He was asked about it today. Didn't say much. All he would say is that the bills were paid, which, again, I think we're learning now is not 100% accurate. And that he said it would be addressed at tomorrow's Board of Governor meetings tomorrow. So we'll see what comes from this. I don't think this is the end of the story. I still have a ton of concerns over their ability to keep up and pay the bills. And like I said on social media before, some of the things I put on Twitter, what's next? Are they going to have bounce checks on players' salaries, or are they going to start having players complain that they can't get paid? What is next? If you look at their breakdown of their revenues, the gate revenues and all that, compared to what's going in and out, they're probably just scraping by with what's coming in to pay the salaries. That's what it looks like from what I could tell. So when it comes to all the other expenses, it's a struggle, which just explains why they're behind. So yes, you can say the owner's a billionaire, but that you can be a billionaire asset-wise doesn't mean it's actually liquid cash that he has access to. And given the sector that he's in, where he's earned all his money, you have to wonder through the last couple of years of the pandemic just how hard his other businesses might have been hit. I don't know. It just does not give you a good feeling about them being able to stay long-term in Arizona. So we'll see where this goes, but I don't think this is over. Now, staying with the Board of Governors meetings, there was confirmation today that the sale of the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Fenway Group has been approved, which is not a big surprise at all, more just a formality. Obviously, a very well-established company with deep pockets. Sales complete. They're officially a done deal. A couple quick injury updates. Anthony Cirelli's now out for Tampa as well. Due to an upper body injury. They're already without guys like Point and Kucherov. They're really severely depleted. They're still doing okay, so we'll see where this goes. But another top player for the Lightning out of the lineup. The St. Louis Blues have signed John Gillies to a one-year contract, $750. They've been short on goaltenders. They're going to be using their fourth different goalie here tonight due to a combination of injuries and COVID stuff. So the Blues are hit hard, like some of the other teams we've seen recently, like the Islanders and the Senators. But I think they have 9 regulars out of the lineup between injury and COVID. So it's not a good situation there, and they might be the next team to be possibly shut down. Now, the other thing I want to take a look at today is the top trade bait board from Jeff Marek, who, of course, hosts the 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliotte Friedman, has his own radio show, The Jeff Marek Show. He's essentially taken on more of a role of an insider this year after Chris Johnson left Sportsnet for a combination of working for TSN and writing for the Toronto Star. And he's put out he has a new blog, just like Friedman has his blog. Marek now has a blog called Rink Fries, and his opening article today talks about the top 25 trade bait that he feels are likely going to get moved this season based off intel he and Elliotte Friedman have gathered here so far this year. Number 1 on top of his list is Mark Giordano, captain of the Kraken, who we talked a little bit about yesterday. Obviously, it looks like the Kraken appear to be more like a regular old school expansion team that's likely going to miss the playoffs. We talked yesterday about a potential return of Giordano to his old stomping grounds with the Calgary Flames, who are off to a really solid start and may want to add at the deadline, so that's a possibility we might see a reunion there, but that contract might be a little bit rich for them, so they might have to get creative if there's any chance. But regardless if it's Calgary or somewhere else, I can see Giordano being a hot commodity. He's made it known he wants to continue to play, so he's obviously motivated for possibly chasing a Stanley Cup if he gets traded. Also motivated for his next contract, and where is he going to land as a UFA? Will he stay in Seattle? Will he try to go back to Calgary on a cheaper deal? Will he end up somewhere else? It's really hard to say, but many expect him to move on here by the deadline. 3 players from the Montreal Canadiens make this list, including Ben Chiarot, Tyler Toffoli, and essentially the on-ice leader, I guess you could say now, Brendan Gallagher. Even though he doesn't wear the C, he essentially is the captain with Shea Weber not actively on the ice. All 3 of these players could find themselves on the go. Chiarot is probably the one that's the most likely, given the fact he's a pending UFA. Many feel that they could get a first-round pick for Chiarot, so that's likely going to be something that happens if they can get that, especially. And when it comes to Gallagher and Toffoli, it's more of a case if the Habs decide to go down the road of a full-fledged rebuild. Gallagher's made it known he may not want to stick around for that. And as much as his contract is not probably the most appealing given the term and money left on it, a lot of teams would love to have a player like that with all that grit and determination and how he plays for playoff hockey. If they're missing that one extra piece that they feel that they need to really make a real strong cup run, he might be able to do that. But the problem might be, can they fit him under the cap? That's going to be the challenge, and it might be easier to do a Gallagher deal in the offseason. So it's hard to say what road the Habs go down. I think Chiarot's one of the main ones to go for sure, but Toffoli and Gallagher will draw lots of attention if they make it more clear that they're going the route of a rebuild. When it comes to the Dallas Stars, Anton Khudobin and John Klingberg are on this list. Khudobin, I think, is more of a given. Klingberg is going to depend if the Stars are in a playoff picture. If they're in the playoff picture, they're not going to want to move one of their top defensemen, even though it's going to be very challenging to keep him in the fold for next year and beyond. He's needing a new contract. It's believed he's looking for a 7 or 8 year deal, around $8 million a year, and that's going to prove very difficult for Dallas to do unless he comes down on price or they find a way to move out other money or something. That's going to be really difficult to do. So it's hard to say. I don't see Klingberg being a star beyond the current season, but at the same time, they're not going to want to deplete themselves for the playoffs. So that's going to be a tough call on how Jim Nill handles that one. But given the fact that Ben Bishop's on assignment for conditioning in the American League, you have Jake Ottinger, you have Braden Holtby, it's pretty much a given that Hudobin will be moved. There's no shortage of teams out there looking for a playoff goaltending help especially, so I can see him getting moved probably even before the Christmas break. He has Riley Smith from Vegas listed, which we talked about before. They're going to have to find a way to shed some money and shed salary here ahead of Jack Eichel coming back. They have time. They can be patient here. They may run into other injuries, which may certainly make things a little easier or more or less complicated depending on what happens. So Riley Smith is the main one, given the fact he's a pending UFA, and many feel that he won't be able to return to Vegas next year because of cap constraints. And I know one team that's been mentioned a lot is the Rangers, given the fact of his previous relationship with Gerard Gallant and the fact they could even use a possible top 6 forward. They've been rolling and playing extremely well, but adding a guy like him ahead of the playoffs might not be a terrible idea. He does list JT Miller on here from Vancouver, and I think a lot of that's going to depend on where things are at with the Canucks. Obviously, they've made some big changes here. They just hired Jim Rutherford today. They've had Bruce Boudreau as a new head coach for a few games. They've won those 2 games. Miller's played well, which is the guy who's on the list here. So debatable to me, but the other thing to keep in mind is Jim Rutherford is one of those GMs, and even though he's not really going to be a full-fledged GM, he's certainly going to be making a lot of the decisions and influencing them. He's not afraid to do bold moves and big moves to shake things up, and if he feels the value is just too good for Miller, he might pull the trigger on depending on where they sit in the standings. It's really hard to say. I think this is less likely, but possible, given Rutherford's history here. Another couple names of players that are likely going to get moved, like Nick Leddy in Detroit on an expiring contract. Mo Sider's taking over that D-core. They don't really need Leddy. Even if they go for the playoffs, they're not expecting to be cup contenders. So Leddy's expendable. Another guy they could retain salary on, make it cheap and more affordable for a team to have him for playoffs. A couple guys in Ottawa like Chris Tierney and Nick Holden. It's surprising that they're still there. It's surprising that Holden was signed, to be honest. But another guy, Michael Del Zotto, who was given a 2-year contract, who I was highly critical of, given the fact that he's been mostly running on PTOs and 1-year deals. Suddenly the Senators signed him to 2 years at $2 million a year. He played the first few games, and he's been in and out of the lineup, healthy scratch quite often. He's apparently not happy with the role he's been given and the fact he's not playing much, and he's asked for a trade. But the problem is I don't see there being any market for him. So good luck with that with another year on the deal. And lastly, the other name I want to mention today, and we'll probably get into some more here over the next couple of days, but Vitaly Kravtsov still on this list. Still very much a belief that the Rangers will move Kravtsov ahead of the playoffs, especially if they can get some extra much-needed depth going into the playoffs. Right now, the Rangers look like they're going to be one of the top teams and might even be considered a cup contender way ahead of schedule. So could Kravtsov fetch them that piece that they need to really be that much stronger going into the playoffs, whether it's Vegas with Riley Smith or to Montreal with former GM Jeff Gorton heading that team now? I'm sure there's going to be interest with some of these Habs players. Maybe that's what they do instead. Hard to say, but certainly Kravtsov is still another player generating a lot of attention that could bring back a good player to the Rangers organization. So we'll have to see, but things will likely heat up here in a few weeks as we approach the holiday freeze before Christmas. So let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.